you return basically the whole room, and then you had two true freshmen at those end spots who played a decent amount as true freshmen. Technically, I guess they're freshmen again because of COVID, but they're obviously leaps and bounds better than they were last year. The year one to year two jump is typically very big for both high school players and junior college players. And, for us, we had two true freshmen who played a lot last year. And then Darrell being a junior college player, I'm looking for him to take a jump as well. So Trey's continue to get better and all those other guys continue to get better. But usually the year one to year two jump is pretty big. So, I've been telling those guys I expect them to improve drastically. And I think I've seen that. You like being able to roll your second group out there against your one offense and feel like you didn't miss a beat. And I feel like we're pretty close to that right now with our groups, 1 and 2. I feel like they're pretty even.
All right, let's go first to John Manson from A Sea of Red.
Coach, you've got a lot of returners and veterans, like you mentioned there, that'll play a lot of snaps and have played a lot of snaps in the past couple of years. But then you also talked about some of these youngsters, and, a lot of them are real hungry and want to play and can play. How do you balance, that when you're talking with them as far as, a guy like a Christian Zachary or Casey Seegers? Yeah, they're talented, but, they got a couple guys in front of them, and it may not be, that they get to play, week one, 50 snaps or whatever the case may be. How do you kind of keep them motivated and keep that, kind of carrot out in front of them?
Well, for me, if you're good enough, you're old enough. So I won't say that any of them won't play in the first game, regardless of the amount of snaps that are in front of them, this, that, and the other. But I think what you can do when you have not infinite, but a ton of depth is find those guys special situational roles to start with, so for certain they're going to be in on those situations, and then beyond that, they're going to sprinkle in the base stuff, and slowly but surely, if you're really diligent about that, they're going to go from playing 10 snaps a game to 20 snaps a game, and from 20 to 30, and so on and so forth. So it's just about being diligent as a coach and saying, if we feel like this player, whether it's a young guy, old guy, whatever, that's not a starter, is good in this situation, let's make sure we have him out there in those specific – feel like he is good in these certain situations. Make sure he is out there in those situations, as well as the base every down stuff here and there. And slowly but surely you'll see that you've spread the reps accordingly, I think we've got that, especially at those end spots. We got a lot of guys. If we can, on a passing down, slide one of those bigger body ends like Christian Zachary or Steven Sings or Trayshawn Clark inside. Trey did that a lot last year on passing downs and had a lot of production. I think he had 3 sacks as a D tackle. If we can find ways to get those guys roles like that and find ways where we can get more D linemen on the field at once, I think that'll evenly spread it out. We'll be in pretty good shape.
Christian Zachary, and I know he came in with a lot of fanfare and a lot of attention on social media. Has he been what he's been hyped to be, I guess, at this point, from a work ethic standpoint, from just an everyday dude kind of thing so far in practice?
Yeah, I can't speak to what everybody else's expectations were for him, but I was expecting him to come and contribute as a freshman, and he's definitely going to. So I think he's a very dynamic player. He's 270 pounds, so, he's a big-bodied end that can play inside already probably, and maybe down the road strictly be an inside guy and be really dynamic for a guy at that position. So I think he's a very versatile player. So I think, yeah, he'll definitely help us. You'll see him out there.
So let's go to Ed Lane from Virginia Talk Radio Network.
When you reference being able to move guys around the defensive line, whether it's kicking them in on pass rushing situations or just positional versatility, is it easier this offseason because you've got the full offseason to work with them on the different intricacies of each position, or was last year's trial by fire almost the best thing for them because of just how different it is in practice versus the game?
I think it's a twofold question. The first thing is, to be able to move guys around, they've got to already master one position, And a guy like Trayshawn Clark, I don't have much more to teach him. He knows what to do. So I can kick him inside on passing downs, which in turn gives Steve more reps at that end spot. You know what I mean? Or Darrell Johnson at his position knows a lot in that boundary position. I can move him over to the field where Trey plays a lot, and now that gives Akil more reps, So things like that, when you got these older guys who you feel confident, don't get me wrong, they're not perfect, but at some point, you've taught them just about all you can from a scheme standpoint, so let's move them over here and let this younger guy learn that position. And now you've done two things. One, you've given your young guy experience, and two, you've gotten your old guy more versatile. So I think that's what, like I was saying earlier, we're trying to be really diligent about that way because, it's still, there's no telling with COVID this year. It might be similar to last year. You lose a guy, and now you need another guy to play another position. So I still had that mindset. I feel like that was part of the reason in my room we were fine because even if we had a guy go down with COVID, we had guys who were versatile and could play other spots. So, or even injuries, right? So you just got to be able to make sure those guys know multiple positions. That way they've got versatility, one for injuries or COVID, or two, situation stuff where you'd rather have a certain guy in a certain position.
Go to Damian next.
Josh, your group benefited greatly with the super senior class, with especially your two starting inside guys in Elijah and Ralphs. And how beneficial is it for them to come back when you get guys got like Chris Body, Kendi Charles, Rashad Whitehead, those guys who, are still a little green and, can learn from those guys in front of them?
For me, just specifically to those two, it only made sense. Elijah didn't enroll at mid-year our first year here, so he got here right before that fall. And I would have redshirted him if I could, but we lacked so much depth, he had to play. He wasn't really ready to play, but he had to play. So, COVID was a blessing for him. In fact, now it's like his real senior year because that first year was, he weighed 260 pounds. So that made sense for him. And then Ralph, we all know Ralph's story being so new to football. Every year he can get is going to help him with his future, right? Because the only football Ralph's ever played is here at Liberty. So he needs as much as he can get. And I think no knock on the previous staff or anything, but his experience has been so much better that he wanted more of it. You know what I mean? And he was excited about coming back. But from a leadership standpoint, you're not going to get much better than Ralph in terms of just being fiery and holding guys accountable. But, man, I'll tell you what, Henry Trabuzzi's pushing both of them. He's pushing both of them. Henry will play just as many or more snaps than both those guys because Henry's so dynamic. He can play on passing downs. He can play on first down, on second down. That's a guy, in my mind, I got three starters at those two spots, and those guys, I'm just going to compete every week at practice, and whoever has the best week of practice can go out there on the first drive. It doesn't really matter to me who starts. That's overrated, in my opinion. If you're rotating a lot of guys, it's overrated. That's a guy that I want to make sure you're not forgetting about because he is going to have a really good year. I think he's going to have a really good year.
How many guys would you say right now you have in that room that you would feel comfortable rotating in there in week one?
10 to 11. 10 to 11. In my mind, you got a group of kids that are probably going to play somewhere between 30 to 45 snaps, and those are going to be a lot of the ends, right, because they don't come off the field. And then you got another group that's probably 20 to 30, and then you got another group that's probably about 10 to 20. You know what I mean? All spread amongst about 10 guys. In a perfect world, right? Okay, you can't measure it based on, you don't know how many plays you're going to play. Is it a tempo team? Is it not a tempo team? Do they sub? Because you can't really sub if they don't, stuff like that. But that's my mentality is I'm probably taking about 11 guys on the bus, and probably about all 11 of them are going to play. So.
Last one here. Let's go to John Manson.
Coach, you mentioned those three inside guys, but what about the ones behind them? Chris Body, Kendi Charles, Whitehead. How are some of those guys coming along in their development? Because next year you're going to have to be calling on them.
Yes, Kendi's doing really well. Kendi was a guy who was moving pretty fast for last year, but I think it's really slowing down for him. He's had a really good camp. He's running with the second group a lot at tackle. Of the incoming freshmen, Chris Body's probably the furthest ahead of this class of the true D tackles. He's probably the most dynamic one and kind of understands what we're asking of him. Rashad's had a good camp. Marquise Brunson's going to be a really good player. We're just kind of blessed where you got some older guys in there where, it'd be if they can rise to the top and they're on the field, that's great. But we don't have to count on them either. So you can still take advantage of that 4-game redshirt rule and play them, but still keep that year. Because like you said, we're going to lose a lot of production in one season this year. So you'd like to save as much eligibility as possible with those guys. But Chris Body's had a great camp. Kenny Charles had a great camp, and we already talked about Christian, but Brunson and Whitehead both are doing well and are fighting for reps with that third group.
Coach Aldridge, appreciate your time. Look forward to catching up with you again soon.
Yes, sir. Thank y'all so much.
All right, thanks everybody for being here. Same time tomorrow, we'll have Coach Freeze, Skylar Thomas,